It's 722 AD and you are a general of the Umayyad Caliphate. You have just conquered the known world from the sands of Arabia to the Atlantic coast. You hold a report in your hand about a group of rebels hiding in a cave in northern Spain. Your scouts tell you they are starving, eating honey from the rocks to survive. You don't order a siege. You don't even order a full battalion. You laugh. You grab your quill and write a phrase that history will never forgive. You call them 30 wild donkeys. You ask your officers, what damage can 30 wild donkeys do to us? That question is your death sentence, because those donkeys are about to lure you into a slaughterhouse known as the Battle of Covadonga, wiping your army off the face of the earth and saving Europe from total conquest. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. To understand why this mistake was so fatal, you have to understand the speed at which the Umayyad war machine was moving. This wasn't a slow expansion, it was a blitzkrieg. In 711 AD, just 11 years prior, Islamic forces crossed the Strait of Gibraltar. They didn't just defeat the Spanish armies, they evaporated them. In one single afternoon at the Battle of Guadalete, the entire Visigothic nobility was decapitated. The king vanished, the generals died, the resistance collapsed. For the Umayyad commanders, this wasn't a war anymore, it was a mopping up operation. They swept north like a wildfire. Cities like Toledo, Seville and Cordoba fell like dominoes. The locals didn't fight back. They opened the gates. The speed was intoxicating. By the time the invaders reached the northern coast, they were convinced that God was on their side and that nothing could stop them. They had crossed mountains, deserts and seas. Why would they worry about a wet, foggy pile of rocks in Asturias? This is where the wild donkeys insult comes from. It wasn't just trash talk. It was a calculation. The Muslim chronicler al-Makari records this sentiment perfectly. The governor of Al-Andalus looked at the map, saw the tiny pocket of resistance in the Picos de Europa, and did the math. To march an army up those narrow passes would be expensive and annoying. Why bother? Winter is coming. The cold will kill them. Hunger will kill them. If they want to live in a cave like animals, let them die in a cave like animals. But here is the detail the Umayyads missed. They looked at the numbers. 300 men versus an empire of millions. But they ignored the composition of those men. These weren't peasants with pitchforks. These were the survivors of the Visigoth Royal Guard. They were hardened veterans who had watched their world burn and had retreated to the one place where cavalry couldn't follow. And they were led by a man named Pelayo, who didn't want to survive. He wanted revenge. The Umayyad arrogance created a blind spot. In military history, we see this again and again. It's the same blindness that hit Napoleon in Russia or the Americans in Vietnam. When a superpower faces a guerrilla force, they look for an army to fight. When they don't see an army, they assume there is no threat. The Umayyad generals were looking for a battlefield with open plains where their heavy cavalry could charge. They didn't find one, so they assumed the war was over. They left the north alone, they let the donkeys live, and in doing so, they gave Pelayo the one thing he needed most: time. Time to organise. Time to learn the terrain. Time to turn a group of refugees into a lethal ambush squad. While the Umayyads were busy calculating their taxes and planning the invasion of France, Pelayo was turning the Covadonga Valley into a kill box. The irony is brutal. If the Umayyads had sent just one serious expeditionary force in 718 or 719, they could have crushed the rebellion in an afternoon. They could have ended the Reconquista before it even began. Spain would likely be an Islamic nation today, but they didn't. They were too big, too successful, and too arrogant to care. They allowed the infection to fester because they thought it was benign. So when the order finally came in 722 to deal with the rebels, it was too late. The Umayyad commander Al-Qama marched his massive army into the mountains, expecting a police action. He expected to walk in, accepting a surrender, and walk out. He didn't know he was walking into a geological trap. He didn't know that the wild donkeys had spent years sharpening their hooves